all the time.
Sarah had been trying to write a book for ages, but she was still on page 1. Until she discovered SpeakYourOwnBook.com. Sarah teamed up with one of our trained writing coaches, who listened to Sarah's book idea, asked the right questions, and guided Sarah every step of the way. In 90 minutes, they had written the outline for Sarah's entire book. Within weeks, using the speak writing method, Sarah became a published author, both online and in print. Whether it's a textbook, an autobiography, a novel, or a children's book, SpeakYourOwnBook.com can help.
Yeah!
Visit our website today to download our free 50-question guide and schedule your free consultation. With Speak Writing, anyone can publish a book. Speak your own book today. You speak, we write.
Aromagees Botanica, a metaphysical store for mind, body, and spirit. Oils, herbs, candles, crystals, teas, handmade soaps, tarot cards, everything you need on your magical journey. Daily psychic and tarot readings, classes, witchcraft, pagan, and hoodoo supplies, most of it made in-house. Try our free Dress Your Own candle station. From spiritual gifts to ritual supplies to religious books, we have the widest selection of metaphysical products in all of Tennessee since 1999. It is our goal to inspire everyone to explore their spirituality in their own way by offering information and products in a nurturing multicultural environment. Open 7 days a week. 223 Donaldson Pike, Nashville, Tennessee, or visit us online at aromagees.com.
A hand-carved natural quartz crystal ball made into a necklace for divination on the go. Crystal balls have been used for centuries in healing and cleansing rituals, as well as for divination. The sphere represents infinity and the circle of life. While a wand uses focused energy, the crystal ball sends out energy in all directions. This makes it a great resource for discovering the complete circumstances surrounding a question.
I'm Atalanta, and this is Everyday Witchcraft. Here on Everyday Witchcraft, we explore everything from witchcraft to the occult to the paranormal and the spiritual. Every week we have special guests that have expertise in the subject matter at hand. Welcome to another episode of Everyday Witchcraft. Tonight's special guest is Prism. She is a shadow walker, an oracle, a transmuter, teaching people and guiding people on how to completely change their lives. Tonight's episode is going to deal with a little bit of more adult material. So if you have young people watching, please use your discretion. We are going to be discussing trauma, past lives trauma, and how you can use the craft to work through that. Some people might want to call it shadow work. Prism's technique includes dance, drumming, song, and even astrology. Our conversation takes many turns in this episode. Let's welcome Prism.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chrissy, also known as Prism. I work, my daily 9 to 5 job is working in mental health and addiction. And my magical world isn't much different than that. I am a shadow walker and a death walker. What does that mean? Well, shadow walker, I sit with people in their trauma. I help them work through it. And then a death walker is I have been around many people in my life who've crossed over to the other side, and they are still in my life continuously. They come through means of dreams, through means of divination, and just through messages. So we're just going to kind of fall into the drum a little bit first. Feel more comfortable, go ahead and close your eyes. Welcome our ancestors, the gods, the celestials, the beings of the underworld, and everything in between.
Welcome. It made me tear up. It made me get emotional.
So I'm also a sound healer, and part of my sound healing is the drums, the rattles, and my chanting. We should say our chanting because it definitely comes through spirit and working with the ancestors. So first, what I'm going to do, the warning ahead of time about it being a little intense, is I'm going to give you a little bit of background how I ended up where I am today. So I came from a very abusive home. Both of my parents were addicts. My dad was a con artist. I left home at the early age of 15. I was married at 16. He was also a very controlling, very abusive person. So the interesting things about a lot of my relationships have been that they have been very controlling and abusive. Part of that is it's because it's just my plight in this life. Part of that is so I can give it back to others and show that there really is a way to heal through this. So recently, I even got out of another relationship. Now, this was not a physically abusive relationship. I truly believe that this soul is just deeply wounded and has a lot of personal work to do on themselves. So it is not the same as it's been. However, walking away, even though it was hard, it is a lot more honest with me today. And I know when things have served their purpose. And when you have trauma, you tend to stay a lot longer because you don't know anything different. So in this work that I do in both my regular 9 to 5 job and the work I do with my clients and in groups, that is all about meeting your shadow aspects, the subconscious and unconscious parts of yourself, but it is also about meeting your trauma. We talk about shadow work and we say that it is the unconscious parts of ourselves, the parts that the light has not been shed on. I believe it kind of works as like a crossroad when you're looking at a street sign and you see it going in many different directions. These are where we cross over. It is our unconscious parts. It is the parts of ourselves we don't want to look at, but it is also the damage that was done by others. The third part of that wonderful little street sign is our ancestors and their wounding, our family wounding. So that's a big part of what I do. I look at where we've come from, what that builds on, where we're moving towards now, and how we can use certain things spiritually and in the physical world to meet these parts of ourselves. One of the biggest parts of that for me is divination and astrology. I do not call myself an astrologist because I think people that do astrology are something they focus on for many, many years. And mine is more like following the breadcrumbs. No matter what I do, no matter what choice of magic, no matter what choice of divination, astrology, or anything like that, they're like little breadcrumbs. And I follow these little paths. And one of the things I've learned with astrology is that you can use your chart and find your greatest shadow aspects or your hardest times, and you can focus on the opposite. Meaning, so like, let's take, for instance, one of the ones I've used. I am a Scorpio. I have a Scorpio stellium. I have a 4-planet Scorpio, and I have 6 all in the 5th house. So this is like saying, here's all this crazy shadow transformation, death energy, except it's coming through your inner child. It's coming through play, and it's coming through. So emotional maturity was very difficult for me. I wanted to be a child forever. I did not understand these things. And then in 2016, I was arrested on a drug charge, and my whole life changed. I did not know anything about the world of recovery. I did not know anything about the world of mental health except for what I was stuck in and fed meds. That was the only thing I knew. And so when I came into this, I just kind of started asking questions. And I tried to fit here and I tried to fit here. I did 12-step, I did NA, I did AA, I did all the A's. And then someone I knew said, "Have you ever heard of adult children?" And I said, "No, but I'll go." So I went to adult children, and what I learned about myself wasn't that I was this, which I believe most people are. Most people don't use from a place of, I just want to get high today, or I just want to get drunk today. They use from a place of wounding. They use from a place of trauma, anger, fear, all of these things. So the way that I did this is I started working this program, and I came to realize that I wasn't like the other people in NA and AA a lot of the times. I was like these people. I had all of this shadow that I was carrying around that didn't even belong to me. And I'm going to get into that a little further. That's part of the gift. So what ended up happening is I did this work, and then of course I ran away from it because that, it's part of the 5th house. The joy of the 5th house is pleasure. It is being very childlike. So I found things that set my soul on fire for a while. And when I was living in a halfway house about 4.5 years ago, I had seen her before. I'd been introduced to her before, but I had never directly worked with Kali. Kali is my mother goddess. She is the goddess that changed my life in every single way you can think possible. Now, some people only work with Kali. I worked with the entire Mahavidya. The Mahavidya is 10 wisdom goddesses. They are all different forms. And what it really is the radical feminine. It is the aspects of the feminine, of the goddess, that we are either too ashamed, too afraid. Society tells us not to. Someone taught us in our life not to. Look at these aspects, right? So Kali's the first one, and she is ravenous. She is that survival mode. She's the root chakra. So she's from that place of survival. So it was really hard for me to work with this energy at first because it uprooted everything. But I also came to realize, however, I came to realize that that's exactly what I wanted. So I sat with Kali, and within the first month of working with her, I said, take everything from me that is not liberation, because that's what she is. No matter what you hear, she is the goddess of liberation. The skulls that hang about her neck are a representation of our ego, a representation of other people's beliefs, thoughts, and theories that have been placed upon us. And she is wearing them as a way of saying, I am my own person. This is who I am. This is how I'm going to show up in the world. When we first when we first learn that, when we first open up that wild feminine aspect to ourselves, a lot of emotions come up. One of the biggest ones is anger. And in society as a whole, we are told as women, do not get angry, because one of two things is what we're called, either crazy or a bitch. That's it.
Or we're hormonal.
Yeah, or you're hormonal. It must be that time of the month. Like
That's right.
that kind of crap.
So did your recovery, is that what brought you to the craft, or was it the other way around? Were you already exploring the craft and then recovery happened, or a combination of both?
So I started in the craft when I was a teenager. I'll never forget it. I was standing in a bookstore, and this book kind of found me, and it was all about sigils, which is a big part of what I do, what I represent, and how I work my magic is sigil work, candle work, color work, and sound. So I ran away from it. So after I got out of a very abusive relationship with my ex-husband, I decided that I was going to pretend with myself, even though I knew the spirit world was very real. My first premonition, I was only 10 years old. And they're usually premonitions. There always have been premonitions about people that I was going to lose that I loved. First was my cousin Jennifer when I was only 10. She passed away by getting hit by a truck while riding her bike. So that was my first one. I had premonitions about the men in my church who were absolutely deplorable human beings. And I kept telling people they were evil, and nobody would listen to me, and come to find out, not only me, myself, but many other young girls, and I believe even some young boys were sexually abused by these men. And so it kind of progressed this way, but the premonitions got to the point after my dad died that I got so freaked out and frightened of everything that I was just like, screw it, I'm an atheist. Now, how does that work for someone who's literally known the spirit world since they were a child?
It doesn't work well.
It turned into me just spiraling so hard. Abusive relationship after abusive relationship, drug addiction, self-harming behavior, all of these things. And we talk about it. We talk about it in a lot of my healing circles about, did you feel something and you were so scared spiritually, or you were so afraid of what you were going to give to other people that you ran away from it? And that's exactly what I did. And I ran away from it for a long time. And it was actually spirit that stopped me from using. So 2017 was, I don't want to get into detail, but the last time I used my drug of choice. And the last time I used period was 2018. So I've had the end of this month will be 5 years. This does not, thank you. This does not mean that I don't believe in certain things. I understand that everybody's recovery journey looks different. For me, I'm a big advocate in plant medicine, huge advocate in plant medicine, which we are making very large strides in the community. Granted, this is the South, so right now we have ketamine treatment. We're working towards other things. But this is where we really see a lot of evidence-based recovery of the brain. So it's an amazing thing to be a part of. So that's why I left, because I was in the rooms, I was in NA, and somebody said to me, well, I heard you did this. And I said, my spirituality has nothing to do with my recovery to another person. It is my own personal business.
Right.
So this is one of the ways that we have some separation in 12 steps versus spiritual lives. So my goal was to bridge this gap. And in 2019, I started a group called the Divine Heathens. We met at a place called NRC, which unfortunately is now closed. So we took it outside. And what it basically was not just people in recovery for addiction, but we had people in recovery from trauma. We had people in recovery from growing up in a bad environment. We had people in recovery from all kinds of things, sex, gambling, whatever it was. Addiction wears many faces. But what it really is, and I love this, the example that the Buddhists use is it's a hungry ghost that lives inside of us. So I am an omni witch. I don't like labels because I grew up in a different generation, and we all know today we like to say eclectic, green, all that stuff. I'm a witch is a witch is a witch. That's
oh my
how
gosh,
I
that's
see
my
it.
saying. I swear to you, that's a witch is a witch is a witch. I swear to you, that's what I tell everybody. I'm like, look, it just, well, what are you? A witch? Well, what do you practice? Witchcraft. I swear to you. And that goes for both pagan people asking me and, the regular mundane everyday people. I swear to you, that is so funny. Let me ask you a question about the group. Okay, so was it a program kind of like the 12 steps, but it was for like a more inclusive amount of people, or was it a group that was meeting for support? I mean, is it kind of like, how you go through the 12 steps and they have the different things that you do? Was it kind of like that, or was it like a support group, or both?
There's a wonderful book. If you are a pagan in recovery, there's a wonderful book called The Pagan in Recovery, and it's very much based off of AA. But one of my favorite sayings from this book says, as a pagan, I am not searching for a crutch. I am searching for a walking stick. And that's
I
one of the
like that.
reasons I love paganism so much and the craft so much, is it is very much about self-responsibility. With other religions, a lot of times Abrahamic Judeo religions, they're looking up and saying, take this from me. The way we walk with the gods is side by side. We grow in relationship with them. So this is a very different world. We did have a lot of pagans in the Divine Heathens. We also had people that didn't know what they were. We had some people that walked more the indigenous path. So it was
It was
really just a
inclusive,
place for us. Yeah. So it was really a
very
place for
inclusive.
us to meet both in recovery and in spirituality, where we could express these certain things. So more people wouldn't take on responsibility. So I had to walk away and leave it alone. Right now, I am in the midst of building something much larger that is going to kind of look like the Divine Heathens, except we are going to offer so much more. There's going to be drum circles and art classes and things like that. Hopefully, the nonprofit that I'm working on right now will be open in the next year or so. It's a lot of work. This is the South, and you have to. I am not by any means. If you are in 12-step recovery, that is beautiful. I go to meetings myself. We need to open the doors in different ways. One of the main reasons we need to do that is because the generation growing up now, we have addicts as young as 14 and 15 years old, some even younger than that. Heroin addicts at 15, 16 years old. They do not like the 12-step recovery because of the religious connotation. They say you get to pick your own higher power, which is fine. But if we look at the history of these things, we know that when the Oxford group got involved, it became very religious. People talk about God constantly. People talk about religion constantly. So this makes people feel that are recovering very pushed out if you
Right.
are not that religion.
And you
So
said something important about taking ownership, and that is well, that's important. And all, and I am everybody's faith, path, tradition, whatever it is, I respect it 100%. But the thing I love about the craft is, like you said, we walk side by side, but also it's not the devil made me do it. It's no, I did it. I did this. I'm taking responsibility for what I have done, that I need to change or that I need to process or go through. So I do like that, about the pagan community.
I 100% agree with that. The other thing with the pagan and the craft community is that even though we are a community, there's so much solace and solitude. I'm a solitary witch. There's many times I've been asked, and I've gone to certain meetings, I've talked about covens, things like that, but it's not for me for several reasons. One of the main reasons is the type of work that I do is not something I could just bring into the community. It is something that even when I'm not trying, if I'm sitting there and I'm having a conversation with somebody, we can be having a regular, everyday, basic conversation. All of a sudden, this person starts pouring out all of
Mhm.
their trauma, all of their, well, this happened and this happened. And this has happened to me for my whole entire life. So people would always say, oh, you're an empath, you're an empath. Look, it's a great word. Empathic souls are empathic souls. But there's a difference between being empathic and being able to shapeshift. There's a difference between, and shapeshifting is another one that I find fascinating that we don't talk about enough in our communities. And shapeshifting, this idea that we shapeshift, like turn into animals or something. Hey, if you can do that, that's awesome.
That is
We
awesome.
can do we can do some of that in our dreams, but I think the true nature, I believe to my core, that the true nature of shape shifting means the ability to feel what somebody else is feeling and
Mhm.
shift out of it. So
That's
that's been
beautiful.
the most difficult part is I can take these things when someone allows me to,
Mhm.
but it took me years to understand how do I release them from myself because I care so much and I love so hard. How can I let go of these now? So, for the past 18 months, that's the deep work that I've been doing. Yes, I'll take this. Now, what do I do with it? Right.
Right.
So, for me, I've learned that for me, it's sound, it's poetry, it's the wind, it's the elements, and there I'm able to release. And anything that doesn't seem to be released that way, I can definitely let Kali eat
When you release,
it.
let her do it. When you release, what do you, when I release, what I do is I put it into Mother Earth or the universe to use it as she or it sees. That way I'm not saying, okay, I release it as positive because I don't know what is needed out there to create that balance. But what do you do when you release it?
So I'm very much fire and ice. Besides working with Kali, I did a lot of work in Norse, continue to do a lot of work in Norse. And my place of release is the Ganunga or the Great Void as or the Akash. But basically I toss it back into the void and it just swirls and dissipates or wherever it's taken, I'm not sure. But that is my place of peace and balance. For those of you who've never worked with the Ganunga Gap or the Void, this is the space of great darkness before the creation of time. Before anything existed, there was this place, right? And as it is expanded, as we've worked through the Akashic, the ethereal realms, a lot of people see colors and they have white light experiences. These are not my experiences. My experiences is deep, dark blackness, but I can feel so much love, so much support. And I don't know how to explain how you feel wisdom, but you can feel wisdom.
Thing. Um, so in your craft, and this is what I find, I have been stunted during certain times of my life. I've had a lot of trauma, you know that, most of which have been relationships. And just kind of repeat repetitive behavior. I think I might have had one, maybe two healthy relationships in my life. And yeah, so I noticed that when I am involved in the relationship, my craft suffers because I'm suffering. And it's like I just can't, and I've noticed that whenever I'm with me and processing all these different things, that it opens up to a whole another level. I mean, it's just completely different. And I'm working more like with the universe and the collective. And do you
Mhm.
find that too? Do you notice that like whenever you are releasing or when you're in the situation, it's like you're stunted, I guess would be the word.
So, good example for that is right before a couple months before me and my ex broke up, I actually stopped working with Kali completely. I even moved her to another room. It was the weirdest thing and the hardest experience, but I knew that I had to do it because she was saying to me, Mother was saying, you have to make this decision on your own. And I feel a lot of the times that spirit world does that for us. It says, okay, I'm going to be here for you and I'm going to support you, but I can't make this decision for you. And it does, it definitely suffers when you are, I like to say, when you drowned in another,
Hmm.
because that tends to be what happens. And these relationships can look like anything from romantic relationships to family relationships to even relationships with your job. If
Hmm.
you put so much of your essence, not your identity, your essence into this thing, it's going to take from you. It's, part of my 9 to 5 job is working a helpline. And that can be really draining in itself. That helpline is dealing with people getting into rehabs and mental health stuff, suicides, domestic violence, whatever it is, whatever they call for, right? So we get them to the proper place. Now, if I'm not shielded, if I'm not protected, if I don't expel that energy, what happens? It gets sucked into me. And now I am feeling heavy. That's the best way I can say it because that's what ends up happening. I became to feel so heavy that I stopped dancing. I stopped doing and I love to move my body. So, this idea that I wasn't doing something that brought me so much joy, but on top of it is another way that I ground and release is dancing. And with feminine release, one of the best places we can release from is the hip and pelvic area. And I was doing a class recently, and it's the weirdest thing, but like women know how to twerk today, but they do not know how to move that birthing canal. They don't know
That
how
is
to, a lot
strange.
of them find such rigidity right there.
Hmm.
And so that's one of the works we'll do. We'll kind of like, can you move your hips? Okay. Can you move them deeper? Most people are just looking at you like, I can shake my butt. These are not the same.
Not the same. I love, that's why I love belly dancing. I
Yes.
absolutely
Yes.
adore belly dancing. And I think that's why belly dancing is so sensual. It's not a sex thing, it's a sensual thing, it's a release. And if you meet somebody that belly dances on a regular basis, there's just, like I was saying with you, you've got such a glow right now. They have a glow. I mean, it's amazing. Any kind of dance, really. But there's something about people, oh, well, that's about sex. No, it's not. It's about feminine energy. And like you said, and releasing it. And it's a natural move. It's a
Hmm.
natural move.
Yeah.
So,
And this is our sacral too.
mhm,
When we get to that space, right? This is where we birth children. This is where intimacy connects to the physical body. And this is a big place of healing for women. I don't think I know many women who have not been sexually assaulted at some point in their life, right? That includes men too. But this is that space where like when we begin to move it, when I'm working with clients and I'm like, I really want to, we're going to do some sacral work, we're going to go into that pelvic area. This is a place where they absolutely lose it. Now this can be just tears or this can be anger, so much anger that comes out of here. So when we're looking at the system, here we've got the root, right? This is supposed to be our place of stability, of grounding. If you were raised in an abusive home, guess what happens? You don't have that stability or grounding. So your boundaries are either nothing but walls or you have no boundaries. So your trust issues don't really exist, right? And then sitting on top of it, our sacral right here, where we carry all that beautiful sexual energy. We talk about the sexual energy, but what else is this? This is a place of literal creation. So we can tap into this space if you're an artist, if you're a writer, if you love doing anything creative, if you make jewelry, if you anything. And you can also create, let's say you love having ideas. You work in the business world and you want to flow with that. Most people are going to be like, oh, you're going to use your intuition, you're going to use your voice, you're going to use your heart, you're going to use your solar plex for that. You're going to use your sacral because this is the space of creation for us. Creation it's everything for the feminine essence. If we're not creating, when I had my hysterectomy, which has been a little over 10 years now, I had it due to trauma. I had it due to miscarriages from trauma, all of these things. So for a really long time, when we would get in and we would do womb work, or somebody would say, oh, are you cycled up with the moon? I would feel so out of place because I didn't have a cycle and because I felt like, well, maybe I don't have a womb anymore. And that was some of the most powerful work I did with the Mahavidya. Now, I did most of this by myself. There were some different classes I took. And I do want to go ahead and say this because I think it's really important for people to know this. Kundalini energy is not a course that we should be taking online. There's a reason that Kundalini was done the way that it was for many, many years. And the very lowest is a 3-year process. That is the very lowest. Now you have people that can go online, take a 6-week course, take a 3-month course, take a 6-month course, and say, now I can do Kundalini. Guess what happens if you don't understand these energy centers? You shut down. It affects your emotions, it affects your mental health, and it can even affect your physical health. This can lead to ulcers. This can lead to, there's so many different things. And this is that way. It's very scary. And it's something that needs to be honored and talked about. Just because we have access to all of these things does not mean we should become a shaman in a weekend. Does not mean that we should become a priestess within a month. These are long things for a reason. Mystery schools were mystery schools for generations for a reason. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't have access to it. It just means that we should do it from a place of honor and respect and understanding that this is not just something you can sign a piece of paper and be done.
I was
Yes.
right before we started shooting, I was telling you, we were talking about like the different classes that we're taking. And this last year, I was blessed and was able to take the spiritual life coaching class. And yeah, I have a piece of paper. Yes, I'm certified. Yes. But I'm not offering it right now because you know what? I have to put it into my life, and that's not an overnight thing. I have the knowledge, but I have to live the life, walk the walk. And it's been an amazing journey so far. And you know what? It's going to continue. But that's a perfect example. You can't just, you can get that piece of paper, you can read these books, and that's wonderful. We have all this knowledge available to us, like you were saying. But it takes time and it's a process to actually put it into your life and make it work. It's just like divination.
I worked with the feminine for so long, and I did not work with the masculine. I did not work with the gods.
Yeah.
And that changed about 2 years ago. And that has been huge for me. It started with Hemdall, and then it's kind of interesting now because it's the sun gods, period. But it's more like in the Celtic pantheon, Lu or Belinus or Belios. They're some of the ones that I'm really drawn to. But in the healing work, there's also like Greek gods like Asclepius, who is the son of Apollo. And when I learned about him, what touched me to my core was his story. So the story of this god, of Apollo's son, is his mother was pregnant with him and she had an affair. I believe it was Aphrodite. I can't remember, but somebody caused it to happen, of course. And in this, they were going to kill her and put her on the pyre. As they were getting ready to, you know, Apollo realized, oh wow, she's with my child, right? So he goes in and he cuts the child out and he takes it and he gives it to the god Chiron to raise. So this is another place where it took me, because not only are we talking about he was born into tragedy the same way I was, Chiron is where we look in astrology to see what we call the wounded healer. So that's another reason why that piece is so important. I don't care if you want to look at all of your signs. I don't even care if you're into astrology, but I can promise you, I've never met one single person that I've worked with that they have not gained something by learning these aspects. Your South Node, your North Node, and your Chiron. These are incredibly important. Our wounded healer changes our lives. My wounded healer is also my twisted sister. My Chiron is in Taurus, and it's in my 12th house, which means the doubts of my own spiritual gifts, the doubts of my own teaching these spiritual gifts. This took me a long, like some years, the last 3-4 years. You know, I've really been working through that. And then like the last 2.5 years, I've really been working hard with my Chiron, because I realized like these are illusions that other people put on me. This is stuff that happened in my childhood or maybe even a former lifetime where something happened and caused such a wounding in my faith in myself, but especially my faith in my gifts. And I realized part of that was because when I was a child and I would tell people about my premonitions, people would say things like, I think you need to go see a therapist. Or, when's the last time you slept? Who asked a 12-year-old that? Like, you know?
You know, that's so sad because like it in most of society, that's what happened. I was blessed. My parents are very open-minded, and but they 100% believed in spirits, and they were just really open whenever I would come to them with something like that. They were very open and would talk about it. They might have joked around with me a little bit, but very open, you know, and that I was blessed in that way. Because I think most people, it's everybody has the gift. It's not, yes, it's a gift, but it's just the way it is. And everybody has that. Everybody has that sixth sense. They have that intuition. They have all these things. The problem is that we suppress it, you know? And I know with me, and I was just talking about this on my Soul Connection show. I have great intuition. The problem is I let outside influences affect mine about me. I let all these different things affect mine about me. And that is what, you know, with other people, not a problem. What is your definition of magic?
Everything is magic. Everything from the mundane to the ether, it's magic. So magic to me is I practice two different things and I do see two different ways. So there's magic and there's alchemy, right? Magic is it's the everything. We can use this in herbs and candles and colors and people and all these things. Alchemy is deep core change. It is where something has been turned into something else. There's a difference between transformation and transmutation. When something transforms, it's more of a release, a rebirth, right? When something transmutes, it literally turns into something else.
Something completely different, and the other doesn't exist anymore. It's now this.
That's it. And a lot of the times with alchemy, we're able to, sigils have a lot of energy with alchemy, especially like esoteric and things like that. I don't have anything in the magical world, in the spiritual world, that I would consider myself to be closed off to anymore. I used to, and then the saints came knocking and the angels were like, hey, we're here. And I was like, okay, this is weird. I don't really even know what to do with that. But it kept happening, you know? So I began to open the door a little more, a little more, a little more. The only thing that I always make sure that I do is, whether I'm working with an ancestor, a deity, is I lay a very clear boundary out before I begin any magical workings. And that boundary is anything that is here to do harm or to run from a place whatever word you want to use, envy or anger or anything like that, because that's one of the tricky things that we don't talk about when we work with ancestry. These were living, breathing people that we have blood connected with or land connected with or connected in some way, shape, or form, right? And this is where we need to be real honest about what we're wanting from our ancestors. If you're wanting to learn and grow, then make that your intention. If you're wanting to uncover some shit, make that your intention. I like to say a veil spell, like we put the veil on and now I'm removing that veil, or I'm taking the blinders off of my eyes, whatever that looks like. I like to use the dagas, which is a rune, and I like to draw it over my third eye, because it also almost looks like the infinity sign. And this is another very powerful, very old symbol. And we can see it kind of repeat itself. But if we also look at it, it's like two serpents that have connected, right? So there's all these beautiful symbols and sigils out there that we think are only used for one thing, but nothing in magic is only used for one thing.
Right. That's exactly right. And if you look at it, if you look at all the different things in magic, it always has both sides of it's balance. You might use a little bit of this side every once in a while, or a little bit of this side every once in a while. But there's both sides. Oh no, that's 100% like, no, it's not. No, it's not. Everything always has a dark side. Everything always has a light side. It's whatever you're, working with at that particular time. But remember, there's always a balance. So,
yeah. And for me, magically, my practice is very much always the dark and the light, or the predator and the prey. It's been interesting, but like as I've studied more esoteric stuff, learning the book of whichever one you choose, Seals of Solomon, whatever
that's
it
what
is,
I've been
right?
studying lately. Oh my God, you've said two things now that I want to comment on. The first one is, the dark and the light. Obviously, that's what I practiced for quite a while. And I'm going to tell you something. Only in the last few years have I admitted that to people, because people look at you in a very strange way. The other thing is that, like, I'm studying Solomon right now, 100%. And you know what? It's really mind blowing. And the one thing about it is, with knowledge comes responsibility. And if you don't have the responsibility, you're not going to be blessed with that knowledge. You might be able to read something, but you're not going to understand it. You might read
Right.
this as this, but guess what? It has another meaning to it. Are you going to be gifted with that meaning? No, not if you're not responsible.
Exactly, because there's a big difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is to learn something, wisdom is to live something. Through experience, we gain wisdom, whether that be experience in life or experience in magic. And if you're a practitioner, the true practitioner, you know this about yourself. If you haven't experienced this piece yet, then even though you can read it and you can comprehend it up here, you're not going to feel it. And
Right.
so with Solomon, what's so interesting is when we look back, if you read a lot about the demons, you notice they're based off of gods. They're based off of pagan gods. You have one that's like an elephant, you have one that's a ram, you have one that's a frog, you have one that's all these heads and different lions and things like that. Part of that was the fear coming from the church, right? When the patriarchy took over, when all this stuff happened, they wanted to evoke fear into people. So they took all these beautiful attributes of the gods and said, oh, if we wrap this up in here, it'll look like it's evil. It's how we use it magically. Because I can tell you, I know several witches that practice with darker, what people consider to be darker energy, who are some of the most radiating, beautiful, astounding beings that I know.
It's because they have that balance. The other thing that, I said there were a couple things that I had to tell you. That predator prey, that is one of the things I teach in bone magic. That I'm, with my book coming out, it's going to have that. I swear to you, the predator and the prey. It's so important to understand that and what it is, and where does that fit into all different aspects of your life. Because sometimes, you need to be the prey, and sometimes you need to be the predator. It's hard to take that first step because you don't want to see these things. You know,
Yeah.
if somebody came up to you and said, "Hey, I need to know how to take that first step," what, like somebody that has no idea even what it is, the shadow work and stuff, what would you recommend them starting?
I would sit with them and ask, where do they resonate? What do you feel is a portal for you? Some people, it's putting pen to paper. Some people, it's going to be through sound, something they can hear, something that's tangible. So it just depends on the person. Every person is going to vary because they're going to have a different way of going inward, or they're going to have a different way of expressing themselves in this world. One of the things that I run into it's quite a little humorous joke from the universe, but I tend to work with people who have an emotional binding. And what I mean by that is they're always in their head. So even when they're trying to push out these emotions, they feel very confused, frustrated. They don't really know what to do. And this tends to be quite a few of my clients. And I believe that they're drawn to me exactly for that reason. So I'm a rising Gemini. I get the mental. I promise. I love to research. I love rabbit holes. I
Oh,
love
me too.
studying. I adore it. However, I have more water and fire energy than anything, and it's real close, like literally real close. And so my water wants to release and my fire wants to move. So that's why I like to work with astrology with new clients. So I can say, okay, I can see your patterning. So here's where you have the strong suits, and here's where you need to work on it. So if somebody's saying, hey, I want to open up to my shadow, or I want to look at these parts of myself. Okay, well, let's see where your strengths are so that we can see where
I like
your,
that.
I don't like to call them weakness, but where your
Yeah,
balance is.
challenges.
Where can we
I
meet your
like that.
balance?
I really like that. I had my chart done recently. I think I might have told you about that, by Ruth Souther, or Souther. And it was actually a show that we did. And of course, I took the super personal stuff out. But oh my God, it was literally, it was just, I mean, everything down to details. So I like the fact that you implement that into the work. And that
Mhm.
just makes sense to do that, you know, because now I see why this has happened, and this has happened, and this has happened, and that's happened a lot. I absolutely see it. Have you ever heard of a bagua? Do you know what that is? A
Mm-mm.
bagua. A bagua is similar to like a birth chart, okay? But it's African, and I don't remember exactly what tradition it is, but it's your life in cycles, and I don't want to give misinformation. I'll get my friend that got me this to come on the show sometime and explain exactly what it is. But it's a lot like a birth chart, okay? But it goes in cycles. So you can see, like, if you've had this many times or this many months in this certain way, you might would call it a house, I guess that's how it would, then you're going to have this happen, and everything happens on this cycle. I don't know if I'm explaining this right, but you can actually look at your bagua and
Mhm.
tell, because of the cycles, what you need to prepare for and go ahead and plan for. It's super
That
interesting.
sounds fascinating. I would definitely love to learn more about that.
Yeah,
Because
it's super.
I didn't just look like, I started with Western astrology, and I'm very fascinated by Kabbalistic astrology. So they have their own. It's beautiful. It really is, and that's a lot of where tarot cards came from, and their meanings behind them. They have cycles, and they have the astrology and things like that. When I looked more into Vedic astrology, even though even though I have such a close relationship with Kali, it just wasn't for me. And I realize it's because it is on the other hemisphere. So over here, where I'm a Scorpio, over there I would be a Libra. And as I learned through Western astrology, I just had a problem going, no, I'm not indecisive. I'm very decisive.
I
I'm
know
that
what I'm
person
doing.
that when somebody can't make a decision, they're like, hey, can you make this decision for me? Most of the time, I'm going to tell you no, unless it's like, let's go eat somewhere and someone can't choose. But like it was like an annoyance almost, right? But then I also started looking at it like, okay, so why would that annoy me when I love Libras? Like I have a lot of close friends who are Libras.
Mhm.
And why does that bother me so much? Well, because the idea of being indecisive would have literally meant life or death for me. growing up in an abusive environment and then being on the streets when I was younger, things like this, that would have literally meant between life and death for me. So to be indecisive for me was like looking at it and saying, well, that's a weakness. No, Libras are balance. They want to be the scales. They want to see it, or they do their best to see it from every aspect, right? And that does balance out the situation. However, if you only are using this side of the scale and things get off kilter, then that's another reason why a Libra can get really, really stressed. Balance is extremely important, whether that be when we look at the scales or when we look at like the rune Tiwaz. So people will say that this is a rune of justice. This is also a rune of balance, a huge rune of balance. And I will draw. That's one of the main things I like to do with sigil work, is just drawing them on the inside of my wrist or drawing them on the inside of my finger, just to remind myself what it is that I'm moving towards or what it is that I'm trying to move away from. That's what I love about the runic system. There's also, like, I have my own astrology runes that I had made for me. And that's the runic system is very different than the tarot system. Tarot shows us so much more about what's affecting us around us, and runes are very much about what's going on with me inwardly. Now, if you get a reading with me, everything's going to be inwardly, because that's how I read. That's how I walk through the world. Well, like even recently, I've been working with more sigil work, and now this sigil work is not runic in nature like it was, or even using the Oham anymore. It's more practiced in hoodoo. And this is not something that I thought but this came through working in ancestral work, and this being presented to me and me going, oh my God, this makes so much sense. Like, that's the thing that I've noticed when it comes to magical workings, especially something I'm doing for someone else. One of the biggest ways I do that, and I'll show you some of my pieces here. Yeah. One of the biggest ways I do that is making these pieces for people, and for myself as well, but they each have an intent, or they each have a deity that they're worked with. Some of these pieces, the process is anywhere for up to a year, just depends on what kind of work we're doing, right? The other big way that I do that is sigil work for people. And it comes out very intuitively, like most of my work does. Yes, I study. Yes, I practice. All of these things are true. But when it comes down to my magical workings, it is like me standing at the sink washing dishes, or I just got out of the shower, or I just got home from work, or whatever's going on. And in that moment, it's like, boom, lightning flashes. And it's like, I have to go do this now, right now. There's no, yeah, exactly.
And that's the intuition. And the difference, there's intuition and intellect. Intuition is what guides you. Intellect is how you get from here to there. And that's, I have been practicing that now for, I guess it's been about a month and a half, 2 months. And it's difficult at first, but as you start putting it into your life, and I'm talking about with me, that's a personal thing. Like I said, intuition with everybody else, not a problem. But with me, I had to differentiate between the two. I still have my necklace that you gave to me, and I actually wore it. I wore it just the last shoot that I did. I wore it, and you can feel, oh my gosh, wearing that, it's just, it has a lot of power in it. And if anything, it's gained
The
power.
other I want to add to what you just said when you said intellect and intuition. When it's trauma, it's instinct. And how do we tell that? Because that was mine. I had to tell the difference between my instinct, my trauma response, and my intuition. And I like to say intuition normally for me comes in a whisper. It's not going to be something that naggingly repeats itself. So if it's in my head and it's just spinning, it's not my intuition. If it's a soft, gentle button, like nudge, don't get me wrong, you don't listen to the nudge. It gets a lot tougher, but it's not going to be just spiraling around in your head.
Right.
That deep inner feeling that we have. And our instinct, especially with growing up with trauma or abuse or being in a relationship, a big one that I see is when someone gets out of a relationship with a narcissist. After they've been with a narcissist for quite some time, I've had this experience myself. it's all about going in and learning to trust yourself again, because this person has gaslit you into believing that you're something that you're not, and into you can't trust what you feel or think or experience because you're wrong and I'm right. You know,
And what if
so
you
this is
get
a
in out of relationships with two narcissists within just a few years? Then you really, really. I didn't say that. I don't know who I'm talking, but that's why it's really important right now to learn those differences. And I like that instinct. I like that. That needs to be an important part of
yeah.
the three eyes. That's really
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, and we think about it too, and I love to when we talk about the three eyes, or when I talk about the three eyes, I love that too because it always reminds me of the maiden, the mother, and the crone. And then in the Mahavidya, she's transformed, but it's also the three versions of the goddess there, which is Parvati, Lakshmi, and Saraswati. Saraswati is creation, Lakshmi is beauty and abundance, and then of course Parvati is the human version, or the more human version, of Kali. So she's like transformation, but she's also the grand consort of Shiva. So like there's all these really cool pieces that we can connect. And when I look at these three goddesses, I'm like, okay, which one is instinctual? Kali is instinctual. Which one's intellect? Saraswati would be intellect. And then who's got that full intuition? Well, I don't believe for a second that any of the three of them don't. But Lakshmi is where it's going to radiate more outwardly because it's about a foundation of trust. Lakshmi is more for homes and families. Kali is very personal work. Saraswati is usually in Hindu, it's more used for like, are you a student? Saraswati is great to work with if you're a student or a musician or an artist, you know. So these are a really great place where we can talk about those, just like the maiden, the mother, and the crone. As the maiden, it's all about being free, and it's more about being, you know, that young place of love where we can just be ourselves and get wrapped up in it, right? And then the mother, this is more of a place where we're coming to realize, what are our responsibilities? How can I show love? It's not just about the random pieces. It's not just, it's about nurturing, supporting, wrapping around. And the crone is that state of observation where we're able to just sit back and say, okay, I know what's going to happen here, but it's not my place to touch it. And that can be one of the hardest things for a sensitive, for an empath, for a walker, is to say, okay, I'm just supposed to observe this situation. And observation is difficult if you're having a hard time trusting yourself, if you're having a hard time, you know, leaving a relationship, or, you know, coming from an abusive background. This is one of the biggest woundings besides our sacral is right here. And that's our intuition. Our third eye has been damaged because someone has told us not to trust ourselves. And society as a whole does that. Tells women, don't trust that, because you're just getting, you know, you're getting caught up in your emotions, or you need somebody else's opinion in this. No, I don't. I need to lock in and listen to what it is I'm feeling and experiencing, you know?
What your soul is teaching you. Well,
Yes.
I would like for you to please tell everyone what you offer, what you do, how to get in touch with you. And I don't want this show to end, but we can do a part two. I mean, I'm loving this conversation. But yes, please let everybody know what you offer and how to get in touch with you.
Sure. So the services I offer is a thing called Wild Link Sound Healing, involving drums, rattles, and my voice. And that's part of it. The other thing is I teach people how to transmute, and we do spiritual work, and I work with trauma survivors. And this is a one-on-one basis. The reason I don't have a website is because of the types of people that I work with. I believe that sacred and safe space is the most important for someone who's going through this. So if you want to work with me, if you'd like to set up a session with me, you can reach me through Roots to Chalice. That's the name of my business. You can do that at Gmail, or you can do that with Roots to Chalice on Facebook, or you can find me on my TikTok, which is going to be Prism Hopes, where I do a lot of talking about things like this, and I tell my own story. That's another big piece, is let's uncover the fact that everyone has a story. And one last tip before I go: do your best not to compare your pain. Just because somebody's been through something you consider to be more tragic does not change the way that it has affected you. Comparison is the enemy of magic. It is the enemy of your mental and emotional well-being. Comparison needs to go with the way of the dodos. Seriously. Like, it is so bad for us.
It
So
really
those are the
is.
ways you can reach me. And I also will be, in the new year, I will be working on some more workshops and possibly a podcast.
Oh, fantastic. Well, let me know when you do the podcast, and we'll just have to advertise that everywhere. But thank you so much for coming on here. And I seriously, I mean, I was thinking while you were speaking, we have a lot of different things to cover, like more in detail. So we'll have you back on, and I love you so much.
I love you.
Blessed be.
Blessed
I
be.
want to I want to thank all of you for tuning in to this episode of Everyday Witchcraft, and a very special thanks goes out to Prism for joining us tonight. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Blessed be.